Hello, my sweet summer children. I'm back with some juice to get you through the long night. So, Game of Thrones, the TV show, is based off of the book series A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. And George has said that he was inspired to write his series by one of my personal favorite series, one of the series that I feel like is the most slept on book series of all time, and that's Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Ted Williams. If you haven't read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn or A Song of Ice and Fire, you can sign up for Audible using my link in the description box, and your first book is free. Also, they're going to give me some coins. I use Audible way too much. So I already have Fire and Blood on pre-order for tomorrow. So if you want to sign up for a free trial, you can get Fire and Blood for free. Like, I'm hoping it becomes available at midnight tonight. But anyway, I've been doing a reread of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and something jumped off of the pages, and I was like, oh my God, this is it. I've done videos before on the similarities between the two series. I'll link them for you, but today I want to tell you that not only do I think I have discovered what I think, I have found out what is Lightbringer, what Lightbringer actually is made of, and possibly the secret to Azor Ahai and Nissa Nissa and the White Walkers. Now, George is on record saying that Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn inspired him to write A Song of Ice and Fire. So first, let's talk about the Children of the Forest from A Song of Ice and Fire versus the Sithi from Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. It's very similar. Much like the Children of the Forest, the Sithi are inhabitants of a place that is theirs only until men arrive. They pay men no mind until other men come and basically want to kill them and run all over them. They have iron, which the Sithi, even with all of their magic, they cannot stand against iron. It's like poison to them. So the Sithi have basically given up. Their home is surrounded. They sing songs of brighter days. They've given up. They know they cannot win, and the enemy is surrounding their stronghold, Azwa. But there is one amongst them who hasn't given up, who wants to liberate his people and save his entire race. His name is Prince Ineluki. Prince Ineluki uses dark magic to cast a spell that he believes will save his people. This is echoed so hard in A Song of Ice and Fire. The Children of the Forest want to save their people, and they turn to dark magic and forbidden ways to call down the Hammer of the Waters. Or so we are told. But what did Ineluki actually do in Memory and Sorrow and Thorn in an attempt to save his people? And where in A Song of Ice and Fire have we heard this before? In the deep caverns below Azwa, lit by cunning mirrors, grew the Witchwood Gardens, the place where the Sithi tended the trees whose strange wood they used as the southern men used bronze and as the northerners used iron. The witchwood trees, whose roots, some say, reach down into the very center of the earth, were tended by gardeners as sacred as priests. Every day they spoke the old spells and performed the unchanging rituals that made the witchwood thrive. As the king and his court in the palace above sank more and more into despair and forgetfulness. But Ineluki had not forgotten the gardens, nor had he forgotten the dark books he had read and the shadowy paths he had walked in search of wisdom. In his chambers, where none of the others came anymore, he began a task that he thought would be the saving of Azwa and the Sithi. Those witchwood trees of the Sithi are very similar to the weirwood trees of the Children of the Forest. So, to save his people, Ineluki gives the trees black iron. Many of the trees sickened and died, but one didn't. Ineluki wove this tree round with spells, with words older perhaps than the Sithi themselves. This time, poisonous iron ran through it like blood. It lived off of the iron now, and now it was time for Ineluki to reap the harvest he had sowed. The witchwood all shot through with baleful iron. By himself, he heated the forge fires hotter than they had ever been. Alone, he chanted the words of making, all while wielding the hammer that shapes, which none but the high smith had ever held before. Alone in the red-lit depths of the forge, he made a sword, a terrible gray sword whose very substance seemed to breathe dismay. Such hideous, unholy magics did Ineluki call up during its forging that the very air of Aswa seemed to crackle with heat, and the walls swayed as though struck by giant fists. He took the new forged sword then into his father's great hall, thinking to show his people the thing that would save them. Instead, so terrible was his aspect, and so distressing was the gray sword, shining with an almost unbearable light, that the city ran in horror from the hall, leaving only Ineluki and his father. When the Earl King at last saw what his son had made, he must have felt his heart turn to ice in his chest, for the blade Ineluki held was no more weapon, but a blasphemy against the earth that had yielded both iron and witchwood. It was a hole in the tapestry of creation, and life leaked away through it. Such a thing should not be, he told his son. Better that we should go into the forgetful void, better that the mortals gnaw on our bones, better even that we never lived at all than such a thing should ever be made, let alone used. But Ineluki was maddened with the power of the thing, and horribly tangled in the spells that created it. It is the one weapon that will save us, he told his father. Otherwise, these creatures, these insects, will swarm over the face of the land, destroying as they go, obliterating beauty they cannot even see or comprehend. It is worth any price to prevent that. No, some prices are too great. Look at you. Even now it has worn your mind and heart away. I am your king as well as your sire, and I command you to destroy it before it devours you utterly. But to hear his father demand such a thing, the unmaking of what he had nearly died forging, and only done as he thought to save his people from final darkness, drove Ineluki past all caring. In that moment he lifted the sword and struck his father down, killing the king of the Sithi. Never before had such a thing been done, and when Ineluki saw his father lying before him, he wept and wept, not only for his father, but also for himself and his people. At last he lifted the gray sword up before his eyes. From sorrow have you come, he said, and sorrow you have brought with you. Sorrow shall be your name. Okay, so now you know the story of the forging of the sword Sorrow by Prince Ineluki in Memory Sorrow and Thorn. If you watched any of my videos on comparisons between Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn and A Song of Ice and Fire, then you know that I believe the person whom I think is the Great Other or this Night King character is very similar, if not inspired by Ineluki. And I also said when we get the backstory on the Night King or the Great Other and the White Walkers, we are going to be very, very sympathetic with them. So there's a few reasons why I think Ineluki reminds me of the Night King, but I'm just going to read you a few quotes of how he is now as the Storm King in the present story of Memory and Sorrow and Thorn. Your enemy, our enemy, died 500 years ago. The place where his first life ended lies beneath the foundation of this castle where your life began. That's a quote from MS&T. Now, this also ties into the Crypts of Winterfell and the Night King, but I'm not going to get into that. I just want to show you some of the quotes that make me get the Night King vibes. So another quote is, he's waited 5 centuries to take back what he feels is his, and his hand is colder and stronger than any of you understand. So to summarize broadly, Ineluki was the prince of the Sithi. Men invaded and took over their land, and Ineluki fought back no matter what the cost was. He died. Well, he kinda died. The spell Ineluki used was so dark that he cast himself and his servants to the realms beyond death, where his spirit burned for 5 centuries in search of a way to come back into the realms of men. He is the devil of Osten Ard, a being of ice and fire, and he wants to be reborn. I know that's a lot to try to digest, but I just want us to all be on the same page, so what I'm saying makes sense. So I've done a video previously on my thoughts about the Night King potentially being this Azor Ahai person. I'll link that series for you if you missed it. So it lines up that the Children of the Forest created the White Walkers. It is yet to be revealed in the books who created them, but it's alluded to that the others were indeed created by the Children of the Forest. because the children of the forest were at war. They were desperate. The timeline points to a very murky history in A Song of Ice and Fire. So it says that the children were driven to madness and they met on the isle in the God's Eye, the Isle of Faces, to cast dark magic, the Hammer of the Waters. This is the direct parallel to Ineluki using the hammer that shapes for his dark magic. So it's debated that the children really meant to call down the hammer and break the arm of Dorn and all of the water magic. But what I believe is that this dark magic was indeed used to create the White Walkers, and the flooding and the Hammer of the Waters was basically a cause of using such dark magic. I won't get into debating the timeline in this video. I have other videos on it, but it's coming. More is coming. So while I was rereading Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, I started to see parallels between Azor Ahai and the Forging of Lightbringer, and guess who? Ineluki and the Forging of Sorrow. We all look at Azor Ahai as this hero, but most of the people in Westeros have never even heard of Azor Ahai, but we have one person who tells Davos about Azor Ahai, and it's not Melisandre. It's Salladhor Saan. So Salladhor Saan does not see Lightbringer or Azor Ahai as a good thing. He tells Davos to be glad that Stannis does not have Lightbringer, the real Red Sword of heroes. It was a time when darkness lay heavy on the world. To oppose it, the hero must have a hero's blade. Oh, like none that had ever been. And so for 30 days and 30 nights, Azor Ahai labored sleepless in the temple, forging a blade in the sacred fires. Okay, so we have darkness laying upon the world. But whose darkness? Was it the darkness of the White Walkers? Or was it the darkness that men had caused in the children of the forest's lives? They were being slaughtered. That could be seen as a darkness. Is it literal darkness? Is it figurative? In Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the darkness is actually the Sithi's darkness, the darkness and sorrow that men brought with them to Aston Ard, smothering their way of life and trampling their world. There is also the parallel of forging a magical blade to be the savior from darkness using sacred fires and blood magic. Those appear in both stories, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, and A Song of Ice and Fire. 100 days and 100 nights he labored on the third blade, and as it glowed white hot in the sacred fires, he summoned his wife. Nissa Nissa, he said to her, for that was her name. Bare your breast, and know that I love you best all in this world. She did this thing. Why, I cannot say. And Azor Ahai thrust the smoking sword through her living heart. It is said that her cry of anguish and ecstasy left a crack across the face of the moon, but her blood and her soul and her strength and her courage all went into the steel. Such is the tale of the forging of Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes. Azor Ahai's wife's name was Nissa Nissa. I talked previously about Nissa Nissa possibly being a child of the Forest in a few videos. I know some other people believe that as well. I'll link the videos on those. But another parallel with Nissa Nissa being a child of the Forest is that the quote says, her blood, her soul, her strength, and courage all went into the steel. If we look back at Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, what did Ineluki use to harvest his sword? He used iron and witchwood, which could mean that Lightbringer was made from weirwood and iron, or some kind of weirwood concoction. The interesting thing about the weirwood and when the children die is that when the children die, they go into the wood, much like how Nissa Nissa went into Lightbringer. There's a quote about this by Jojen. Instead, they had the trees and the weirwoods above all. When they died, they went into the wood, into the leaf and limb and root, and the trees remembered. So it seems Nissa Nissa went into Lightbringer, much like the children go into the trees. So could Lightbringer have been forged with weirwood and the blood sacrifice of a female child of the forest? Well, it says that her cry left a crack across the moon. Now, let's say that the Red Sword of Heroes was forged by the children of the forest. When was magic used so strong that it could crack the moon? During the breaking of the arm of Dorn. Finally, driven by desperation, the little people turned to sorcery and beseeched their greenseers to stem the tide of these invaders. And so they did, gathering in their hundreds, some say on the Isle of Faces, and calling on their old gods with song and prayer and grisly sacrifice. 1,000 captive men were fed to the weirwood, one version of the tale goes, whilst another claims the children used the blood of their own young. And the old gods stirred, and giants woke in the earth, and all of Westeros shook and trembled. Great cracks appeared in the earth, and hills and mountains collapsed and were swallowed up. And then the seas came rushing in, and the arm of Dorne was broken and shattered by force of the water, until only a few bare rocky islands remained above the waves. Can you see those parallels? Not only to Nissa Nissa and the Hammer of the Waters and Azor Ahai and Lightbringer, but to Ineluki and Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. The common belief is that the children meant to call down the Hammer of the Waters to stem the tide on the invaders and stop them, but it didn't work. They were already there. Boats were a thing. It doesn't make sense. Why would they use such dark magic for something that wouldn't work, or for something that didn't even have the possibility to help them? It was not that. It was the creation of the White Walker. So was this sword forged for the White Walkers, or at least the one who led them? Azor Ahai is said to be the champion of fire, and we look at him as a servant of R'hllor, heart of flame. But is that misdirection? Common sense would make us never look to the man armored in ice to be the champion of fire. Ice and fire are opposites. Ice freezes and fire burns. But in the story, it doesn't seem so. In the very beginning of A Game of Thrones, in the prologue, book 1, it says, "Nothing burns like cold," which is true. The others are also described as having burning blue eyes. Their weapons are alive with moonlight. So Jojen clears all of this up for us. Ice and fire are not opposites. They are one. I hate these stupid mountains of yours, Prince Bran. Yesterday, you said you loved them. Why can't it be both? Mira reached up to pinch his nose. Because they're different, he insisted. Like night and day, or ice and fire. If ice can burn, said Jojen in his solemn voice, then love and hate can mate. Mountain or marsh, it makes no matter. The land is one. This ice and fire thing being one is also echoed in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Ineluki, or the Storm King, is associated with both ice and fire. They refer to his cold touch and darkness. I must warn those who remain after me that I have seen the coming of a great cold darkness, the like of which my people have never seen. It is a dreadful winter that will come from the shadow of the yew, the mountain of the immortal cloud children. It will blast the lands of Equinox like a black wind from the lands of the dead, cracking the very stone of our mountain in cruel fingers. But Ineluki is also associated with fire. His followers are called the Red Hand. They're cloaked in robes of crimson. But the entire Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series hinges on the false messenger. The main cast are trying to get the sword Sorrow that Ineluki forged long ago, and they're trying to get Memory and Thorn, and they're trying to get the swords Memory and Thorn all to come together based on a prophecy. And in Memory and Sorrow and Thorn, this prophecy, this of the three swords that must come together, it's written by someone named Nisse, Nisse, not Nissa, like A Song of Ice and Fire. But anyway, the prophecy is a false messenger. The main cast don't know it right now, but if they do it, if they do bring these swords together, that is exactly what Ineluki wants. It will bring him back from the lands of the dead. So not only could the Night King or the Great Other be Azor Ahai, Lightbringer could be Weirwood, and fulfilling the prophecy or trying to fulfill the Azor Ahai prophecy could be the undoing of everyone and everything. And it could be exactly what the Night King has been planning for for a millennia. But what do you think? I have some other Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn versus A Song of Ice and Fire videos coming up, and it isn't about Azor Ahai, but it's about the prince who was promised and what that could actually mean. I'm dying for Game of Thrones Season 8 to come out. I'm dying for The Winds of Winter, but Fire and Blood is coming. And for the meantime, let's just keep reading. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.